Hi there, and welcome to another Campfire Project panel discussion. And today I have with me, first of all, Jurgen Schmeckel. Jurgen, I'd like to introduce yourself to the group, please.
Hi, Alan. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me again on the campfire at 9 o'clock in the morning. I'd love to sit at a campfire right now. It's a little bit chilly here in Sydney after the warm days. A little bit about me. I'm 59 years old. My accent is German, so I grew up in Hamburg and live in Sydney and Northern Beaches now for 15 years. And 2 years ago, I had the epiphany that being married for more than 25 years is not by automatic. There are so many relationships going bust left, right, and center. So being married, happily married for so long, I thought there must be something we do right, and either consciously or subconsciously. So I've looked into this and did a lot of research and came up with some pretty amazing models. And one of them is why money is more important than sex, which I then concluded into a new book, which comes out in a couple of days. And so I'd call myself a relationship expert. I'm more a guide than a coach. And the comparison for me is oftentimes that I look at a coach throughout a break in football. They don't look at the first half and see what went wrong. They look, what can we do now to make the score even and to get some goals in. So
this will be an interesting conversation then, because you're talking about 25 years of successful marriage. I'm on the other side. I've had two divorces, so it should be an interesting conversation. And then we have, thank you, and Michael Lauria from Melbourne. Introduce yourself, please, Michael. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Alan. Thanks for having me again. I'll look forward to this. So I'm a relationship coach and men's mentor in Melbourne, and my journey is a little bit different to Jurgen's, so but more similar to yours, Alan. So I had a 12-year marriage which didn't quite go so well, and then after that, and there was lots of fallout from that. So after I decided to become a counsellor and a coach and help men through that process of rediscovering themselves after a long-term relationship. I'm now happily married again. I have 3 children, and I'm a relationship coach primarily and a men's mentor. So I love helping couples to create more conscious relationships. I understand, things can go wrong along the way. I think Jurgen and I are probably our approach may be slightly different. I'm not so concerned about what happened in the past. I'm more concerned about or more work more with people on a subconscious level and focus on the future.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And then we have Paul Tokgozoglu. Now, how do I pronounce this correctly, Paul? Tokgozoglu. Is that right?
It's close. It's close. Tokgozoglu. It's a tough one.
Every time I looked at it, I go, oh, my dread. Welcome to the show, Paul, especially it's Sunday over there in America. So describe yourself a little bit to the team.
So thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And so I have been an entrepreneur for the past couple of years. I'm also in the Army. I'll be getting out of the Army here pretty soon and transitioning into being an entrepreneur full time. And I'm involved in podcasting. I host a show called Beyond Homo Sapien about the evolution of the species. And I run a business development agency. And I'm involved in a number of different projects, from real estate to revolutionizing education. Education, sorry. I can't talk today, man. But education using artificial intelligence and a bunch of crazy shit that I'm working on. But from the relationship perspective, which I think is where this conversation is going to head, about I was married to a woman for about 4 years or so. And then I realized and accepted that I'm gay, and our relationship ended and we separated. And now we're really good friends, and we're like the best of friends. But that was certainly it's kind of my relationship story. And now I'm navigating through the kind of fresh waters of being single again and being gay, which I've never really been able to do, so it's an interesting time of transition for me here in the early stages of my life. So yeah, that's me
Excellent.
from a relationship perspective.
Okay, well, I don't know about everybody else who's listening into this discussion today, but I'm looking forward to learning a lot from you guys. So I reckon it's going to be very interesting. So, but looking at creating healthy relationships, and that's what we're talking about today, let's look at where the relationships have been going wrong, first of all. What were your beliefs, or what did you find, first of all, Jurgen, when you started looking at relations? Because you had an interesting introduction to it through one of your friends, didn't you?
Yeah, well, there are so many introductions I had to this because over the years I spoke to so many men, and there are stories which obviously I can't share all of them, but one was really hitting home very hard. I was playing squash with a friend of mine back in Germany pretty much every Sunday, and on this particular Sunday I picked him up, and usually the banter starts while we're in the car. So and then he said, I won't be a match for you today. And I said, so why's that? And he said, well, I've just found out my wife is in love with a different person. And well, needless to say, we didn't play squash at that night. But the long and short of the story is she started working again after 13 years raising two beautiful boys. And for the first time, she got appreciation from someone outside of herself. And that really made it clear for me that you need to make sure that you are still working even if there are children around, because the appreciation we get from clients, customers, boss, colleagues is so much more than just the money we earn there. And so that's where a beautiful relationship from the outside, it looked really, really healthy, and went wrong because internally they didn't appreciate, didn't work out that this part is crucial for both to be recognized in the community, to contribute. And so back then I looked at my own relationship. Back then we've been married for 9 years, I think, if I recall it correctly. And then you think, could that happen in our relationship? And that's pretty much where it's all started. Back then I didn't create this inspiring relationship, but still that was with me all the time.
Excellent. And with you, Michael, what did you where did you start with all this? How did it come about for you?
My journey started when I separated from my ex-wife of 12 years, and that was really inspired by the fact that it was a very, very difficult period in my life for quite a number of years afterwards. But I recognized that it was going to be a very difficult process very early on. So I decided to go and get a diploma of counselling initially, and I've moved forward into coaching and mentoring now. But back then that was all about supporting men through the process of separation and divorce. And as time went on, as I was coaching and mentoring and counselling these men, some of them decided they wanted to attempt to reconcile with their ex-partner. And so my practice went from just helping men to then relationship coaching as well, and relationships therapy. And then I found another passion altogether. So I've just found a way over the years just to evolve and adapt and combine both of those things into one. And my belief surrounding relationships is that, and I call myself the conscious relationship coach because of the simple fact that I believe that people get into relationships very unconsciously. They stay in them very unconsciously, and then they leave unconsciously as well. And so I've just noticed this pattern, and I've done a lot of research. I've got my own personal experience to draw on too. And I have found that this is the case. People are literally going through life in every stage of their life, in every aspect of their lives, most of the time, incredibly unconsciously and unaware. And they're actually not being, authentic and genuine and honest with themselves about where they are in life, who they want to be with, and the direction that they're actually heading in. And when people start to step up and become more authentic with themselves and start living and creating their life at a very conscious level, they find that they make much better decisions from a place of clear judgment and clarity.
So it's really important to be able to understand where you're coming from and everything else. So one thing we don't get a manual for is relationships, and the other one of raising children. So it's the two areas that are most important in life, but we don't have any guidance in there. So,
and finance, to add a third one, finance.
Money, that's right. Yep.
Well, yeah. Well, usually when the relationship goes, the money side of it really kicks in too, doesn't it?
Exactly.
A lot of losses in that side of it. And Paul, with your relationship, what did you find? You realised that you were gay. What was the process there? How did that come about for you?
So I'm on the autism spectrum. So it wasn't necessarily a case where, because I know like lots of people who are gay, they have this whole thing where they know they're gay and they feel like it's wrong. So they try to suppress them. They try to suppress those feelings. And then that leads to a whole host of issues, obviously, and great struggle. For me, it was kind of the opposite side of the thing where because I'm on the autism spectrum, I was struggling my whole life with just feeling my emotions in general. And it wasn't until I really connected with myself and began to develop my emotional intelligence and really get to the bottom of everything to do with autism and learn how to basically change my life from being totally like shut down all the time because I was so overwhelmed by my own emotions and the world around me, and then take from there and go to a place where I could understand myself and know myself, like Michael was saying. And yeah, I really resonate with what you just said, because that's exactly what was happening for me. Is I was literally unconsciously going into the relationship where I just could not feel my feelings. So once I did start to do a lot of therapy and a lot of personal work and began to develop myself and my own emotional intelligence and really step into the person that I am supposed to be in this world, that was when my sexuality kind of kicked in about a year and a half ago. And I was like, oh man, I'm gay. Like it's obvious, like once I was able to feel it and once the emotions kind of came online, it's an obvious thing. It made itself apparent very quickly. Let's put it that way. And it was the answer to a lot of questions like, oh, that's why our sex life is terrible. I'm gay. It's not going to work out, and that's okay. Obviously it was incredibly hard and very difficult to go through for sure. But once it made itself known, it was kind of obvious, if that makes sense. But I really do relate with what Michael was saying, because that is absolutely what was happening with me. Is I was just unconsciously following the status quo of society without ever taking the time to actually dig into my own emotional intelligence, because it was literally offline and I just didn't know myself. I was so young, you know what I mean? We got married when we were like 22. So young, I just was not developed yet. And yeah, I didn't know myself, didn't know really anything about who I was or how this all went. And in those situations, again, approaching this from the perspective of education, the general society usually does not educate people into all of the options. No one ever sat me down and was like, hey, just so you know, there's a chance you could be gay. Like, just because, like, just put that on the table. It's possible. You know what I mean? Because when you're raised up in this type of Western culture, like I was here in America, raised in a fundamentalist Christian church and a lot of other organizations like that, you're just taught like, oh yeah, you're straight until proven otherwise. It's kind of the status quo. It's never given like, oh, you could be gay, could be bisexual, could be this, could be that, could be asexual, which I know some people are asexual where their sexuality is just not really a thing for them. And that's cool too. So, you know what I mean? So I just married a woman because that was what I thought, that's what you do, right? And yeah, it wasn't until I did a lot of discovery that I found out what was really going on.
Well, may I ask you a question? Whilst you were married for those 4 years, did you ever get a sense or a feeling that something just wasn't right? Aside from the emotional intelligence, did you get some kind of gut feeling, some kind of intuition within you that told you this just isn't right? There's something about this that just doesn't fit with me and sit with me well.
That's kind of the thing, is that I was literally cut off from my gut feelings, and my intuition was not there. I didn't know what it was until what do you say?
You felt something though, did you? You felt like something wasn't right?
No, that's the whole point. I couldn't feel. I didn't have any feeling. I thought I did, but now I know, no, I was just living up in my head. Just living up in my logical side. That's the only part of my body that was online. You know, there's this stereotype about autistic folks that we are like, you know, Sheldon in the Big Bang Theory, where they're just very logical. We just love our routines and we love math and all this other kind of stuff. It's like, no, it's kind of a stereotype, because usually for most autistic people, they literally can only live up in their head and they're cut off from the rest of their body because your vagal nerve system is not developed and it's totally underdeveloped and you're not connected with yourself internally. Autism is kind of a disorder of connection. So it's not until you manually go in and start to repair your vagal nerve system and you're able to actually feel the different neurotransmitters throughout your body, throughout your gut, and throughout your heart and all of the other places of your body. And that's when these feelings kind of come online. And you literally, I was born anew when I was like, oh my God, it's totally different. Like, I remember the day when my emotions came online and I was thinking like, what the hell is this? Oh my God, this is not my usual experience.
So how did you go about developing the vagal mind? What happened there?
I took a lot of psychedelic mushrooms, honestly. And really helped. It was really, really helpful, honestly. And I did a lot of therapy. I've been with my therapist now for about 2 years. She's been very helpful. Therapy is incredibly important, I think, for anything like this. And Wim Hof method actually helped a lot, if you know about that. Wim Hof method and cold exposure and breath work and meditation and stuff like that is huge. And really just like reprogramming my body, honestly, and getting myself out of that totally overwhelmed mode. So like fixing my nutrition was huge. Like for me, it was a physiological problem where my body was just not physically, my emotional side of my body was just not online. So I had to basically go in and surgically repair a lot of that stuff. And the mushrooms kind of expedited the process.
Wow.
Excellent.
I just want some mushrooms now.
Yeah, sorry, Paul, may I ask you, you said earlier that you spent some time in Germany. Was this through the army?
Well, you know, I can neither confirm nor deny. But, okay. You know, in this hype, of course, anything I say about psychedelics is a fictional story.
Yes.
That's the part. I'm just making that stuff up just to impress you guys. But, yeah. You know, but totally hypothetical.
I was just about to ask how the hero of your story went through this in a, let's say, structured environment like the army is, because that must have been terrible.
Oh yeah. It was. I was having panic attacks just about every single day back like 2 years ago or something like that. So it was. My body was like destroying itself to an extent.
That must have been such an interesting and confronting experience, because we are all used to, or our experience is that we develop all of this stuff, our mind-body connection and that connection with our emotions. It's a gradual process for the majority of people from when we're born, and it's a gradual process. But for you, as you were saying, and I love the terminology that you used, when you came online, it's almost like Skynet. In you know, it came online, like everything came online. It must have been an overwhelming feeling of all of this stuff just coming up, emotions and feelings and thoughts that you're not used to, and to navigate your way through that must have been incredibly challenging.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It was tough. A lot of therapy. Get a therapist if you're going through that stuff. Definitely.
You know, from what I can see there, and that there'll be a lot of men going through a similar type thing, as you're talking about Skynet, for instance, switching on and all that information coming through, because most of us, well, I've been through 2 divorces, and I think most of that time going through that process, I was numb, didn't know what direction or to travel in. So it's going to be something that most people will feel. It doesn't matter whether they're gay or straight or whatever. If you're not connected in your relationship, you're going to pull right back. And virtually you want to be numb, because the pain's so great when you first lose your partner. And then that's the state that you live in for a while. So what's the best way for people who are going through something like that? How can they start to work and move forward in their relationships?
So
That's an easy question, but very, very hard to answer. And I describe it that at every stage you have 3 doors. To go through. The first door is to do nothing, stay in your relationship, walk down, and just wear the consequences. The second door is actually to leave and say, well, I've had it, I'm out of here. And the third door is to actually own it and realize that you are the problem and start to change yourself so that you can change the relationship. And that's the third one is the hardest of them all. So it's easier to actually stay, and it's easier to walk away and say, and blame your husband or blame your wife and just say, it didn't work, I'm out of here. But you take yourself with you. So in the next relationship, you are starting the same patterns, you're starting to do the same mistakes because you take yourself with you until you actually realize, hang on, the buck stops with me. And that's the hardest call, to actually own up to it and realize, hang on, I need to change myself.
Yeah, it's not taking all the responsibility on yourself, but it's taking and looking at yourself first. You can't blame somebody else until you've actually looked at yourself first.
Absolutely. So one of the things I say is you can only give what you have yourself. So if you don't have respect for yourself, you can't give respect to the other person. If you don't love yourself, you can't love the other person.
That's very true. What are your comments on that, Michael?
Look, I don't believe there's any blame in relationships. I don't believe there's any blame at all. I believe, and based on what I've, the evidence that I've sort of accumulated over the years, it is that people are simply unaware. It's a matter of ignorance. It's a matter of just being unaware of the self. So when we talk about looking at ourselves and blaming another partner and someone's the problem, I believe that if we're not consciously aware and we're not self-aware of who we are as a person, how we're showing up in our relationship, how we're showing up for ourselves in life, this is where there's disconnect. And the disconnect starts from within, and everything's from the inside out. So the disconnect starts from within, and then it becomes an external thing. It manifests externally. And in the context that we're talking about in an intimate relationship with another person, if we're not aware of our stuff, and I would just call it stuff because we've all got something different, but if we're not aware of those subconscious beliefs and values and the paradigm that is underneath all of that, then we are going to show up in our relationship in a totally different way than what we intend. And whilst the intention may be there to show up in a positive, loving way, if our beliefs and our values are not in line with that, then we will unconsciously sabotage the relationship. And what's interesting is we've got 2 people in the relationship here, so they're both coming into this with a different set of values and beliefs, and they're both in some way going to sabotage the relationship based on those values and beliefs. So it's really a matter of the individuals coming to a higher, greater level of self-awareness, and then that translates into a more healthy relationship.
Excellent. You agree with that too, by the look at that, Jurgen?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's one of the things I know in my relationships as well, as the first one, I went through a childhood where I always felt disconnected from everybody. So obviously that was the way I felt about life in general. Being into a relationship, well, the first one lasted 16 years, but the main reason I think it lasted was the fact we were raising 3 boys. We had our careers and everything else, so we were virtually focused on that and not focused on the relationship. And so it just slowly died. And as you said, Jurgen, you just stay in there and keep the thing going. That was door number 2. And I think I lived on in that one until the wife decided she'd take door number 3. Sorry, take door number 2 and leave completely. So I was in door number 1 and away we went. So yeah, got to get the doors right here.
Yes, yeah.
I only open, there's no doors here.
Yes.
Hard to select which one. But yeah, I was going to just keep it going because that's what I thought I had to do. But the wife decided that she would take the move and move out. Neither of us really took the time to work on it. And then in the second marriage, I thought, right, we're working on it, but I don't think either of us were. We were still had that foot, partway through door number 2, and then finally we separated.
So this is generally what happens, people try to work on their relationships consciously. So they make conscious choices to schedule sex. They make conscious choices to, connect in terms of having a date night once a month. They do all these conscious things to try and fix whatever the problem is, when the actual issue is actually underneath all of that, happening on levels that they're not conscious of. And this is why people get to the point that they do. And unfortunately, couples don't reach out until they're at breaking point. They don't reach out to someone like myself or Jurgen until they're at breaking point. And that is the absolute worst time to be engaging somebody like us, because by then there's this whole repair process that's got to happen before you can get to the part where you actually start to rediscover your relationship together. And so I'm talking to people now about when things are good, let's make sure that we work on ways to keep them that way instead of allowing them to degrade over time. And then when it's panic stations and you've got to go into fix-it mode, it's obviously better to avoid that if possible.
It's, as you say, it's being conscious of it first of all in the early part of the relationship, and then working through that. I know that there are a lot of people out there that say, okay, get your diary, select, put in this time for this and this time for that and everything else. Well, it becomes a routine that doesn't really have the deep unconscious connection to it. It's just something we're thinking about, we're not really feeling.
Exactly. And it becomes an obligation and it becomes a chore. And when you attach, we have to have a date night. We have to have sex at 7:30 p.m. on Wednesday nights. It becomes a chore. It becomes an obligation, and then people kind of drag their feet. And I'll tell you, all of the couples that I've coached over the years, when they've been to a counsellor or a psychologist or somebody like that who says, schedule sex, schedule a date night, schedule this, all of a sudden that date night is a disaster. It's a disaster because both people actually don't want to be there. Just because they feel like they have to. Sex doesn't work, right? For the same reason. And this causes even more of a disconnect between the couple, and it puts them into a place where it makes it even more difficult to repair the issues that are there.
Being able to read people, looking at the expressions and everything else, as they say, if you're seeing contempt or disgust on your partner's face on a regular basis, you've got major problems. And quite often I'll see that between people when I'm just meeting them in social environments, in networking dues, and know that they've got problems long before they do, or long before they consciously know they've got those problems. But as you go off to counselling to find an answer, well, as you said, you're both in that mind where you don't want to be there, and you're wondering why counselling at that level doesn't work. So this is really something, as you were saying as well, Jurgen, earlier on, that you need to start at the very beginning and build that relationship. So it's a conscious thing to start with, and hopefully then that moves into the unconscious as you're going through your relationship. So it becomes a pattern in the way that you work together.
I can tell you, after 25 years, it's daily work. It never becomes totally unconscious. You need to be on alert all the time.
But most of having that conscious awareness of it, but it's easier to do because of the practice.
Sure.
And that's into the...
Sure. But still, you can't behave like a prick just because you're married for 25 years.
Well, that's where a lot of us end up going at some stage. We wonder why the relationship doesn't work. As I say, it takes two to tango. So we've both got our responsibility in the relationship. So if you've got the men who are listening here today who are in the middle of their relationships or wondering whether their relationship's going the right way or whatever, what sort of advice do you have for people? Jurgen?
So my first advice to especially men is disconnect to reconnect. I mean, disconnect, spend 1 hour, 2 hours in nature. Could be at the beach, could be in the forest, could be just sitting on the park bench without your mobile phone, without a laptop, without your iWatch. So really disconnect from technology to find yourself, to ground yourself, and then you can reconnect with yourself, and then you can reconnect with your spouse. But in our busy lives, we are running around like headless chicks, especially in towns like Sydney and Melbourne, where living is so expensive. You need to do not a 9-to-5 job. It is a more an 8-to-8 job. So that already puts so much pressure, oftentimes, especially on the men, plus mortgage pressure, plus in-laws and their own mother and the kids, and everybody is nagging. So there's so much pressure, and eventually it bursts at the seams. But if you would ground yourself by just spending me time, quality time with yourself, disconnect from technology, and really, just listen to the birds or listen to the waves, and thereby grounding yourself, I think that's the first step I recommend to do, because then you can go back to your spouse and have a meaningful conversation.
Yeah, so it's a bit of an emotional disconnect from everything that's been going on around you.
Absolutely. Look, we come home at 8 o'clock at night, turn on the television, you only see bad news, and then at 10 or 11 o'clock after a glass of beer or wine, you fall asleep, and the next morning the whole race starts again. So you never stop. But you need to stop to actually disconnect and take your breath.
Take that bit of time and recharge the battery, so to speak.
Absolutely.
And how do you work with people in that area then, Michael?
Yeah, look, I tend to agree with Jurgen. Sorry, not Jurgen. Jurgen on one level there, and that is in terms of disconnecting to reconnect. I think that's important if we do that purposefully and consciously. So, it's very important to fill our own cup. When we fill our own cup, we can fill another's as well. And one of the big things that I talk to, especially men about, but couples as well in relationships, is it's all about how you show up in a relationship. So, most times we sleep in the same bed as our partner. So what we have to be mindful of is that as soon as we wake up, we're showing up for life straight away. We show up for life as soon as we wake up. The next thing we do is we show up for our partner. So we look at our partner, or we acknowledge our partner who's sleeping next to us. And we say, good morning, I love you, kiss, hug, whatever happens. It's an acknowledgement. It's showing up for your relationship, right? And then taking 100% responsibility for how you think, what you choose to focus on, and your subsequent actions as a result. So yes, part of that is disconnecting in a healthy way. So going out into nature is a great one that Jurgen said. Guys can do other things as well. I mean, go for a drive, go to the beach, go into nature, just do whatever you need to do to disconnect, to fill your own cup, definitely. But the biggest thing for me is showing up, making a point of showing up. And if you do that enough times and for long enough, consciously, it does become an unconscious thing. Repetition is the key. So if we just continue to do the same things consciously, no matter how uncomfortable or how unfamiliar it feels in the beginning, the way that we show up to our partner is exactly the way that they'll respond to us. Maybe not initially, but over time. And that's how you create healthy connections between couples. It's by both of you showing up at a high level as often as you possibly can.
So very much a case of consistency and repetition and practice.
Yep.
So it's not a matter of going, okay, I've changed. Why haven't you changed?
Yep.
The other person hasn't realised you changed yet because they hadn't seen enough of it.
Correct. And it's about both taking 100% responsibility for how they show up in the relationship and how they contribute to the relationship on that level too.
Yeah.
One of the things I say, if in the morning the first thing you touch is your touch screen and not the skin of your partner, something is wrong.
That's right. Totally. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And a good thing for people to remember as well is it takes just as much time, energy and money to repair or rediscover a relationship as what it does to split up and all the stuff that goes on afterwards. It takes just as much time, energy and money to repair the existing relationship of whom you already have a connection with. There's a commitment there. You may already have children too. And not that you should, not that the motivation should be children, but if there's already an existing relationship there that has worked up until a certain point, then there is a very high potential of that being able to be repaired and rediscovered in a really healthy, loving, intimate, connective way.
And what thoughts have you got on that, Paul?
I think communication is so important for all this kind of stuff. You know, communicating your needs, communicating really any issues that are happening in the relationship. Like if you do go out into nature, which totally agree with you guys, that idea of disconnection and taking time for yourself so you know how you feel is absolutely crucial. But I think once you figure out how you feel, communicating that in the best possible way is absolutely important, is absolutely essential. And the other thing too, especially like for me, and honestly, like, I don't know, obviously I have a bit of a unique situation, but I know a lot of folks out there, especially younger folks like me, who get married really young. And then they take the time to, I guess I want to bring up the opportunity that you might, especially if you get married really young and then you take the time, you listen to what Jurgen and Michael are saying here, and you take that time to do a lot of self-reflection. And then after you got married at 22, like I did, and then after 5 or 6 years, you're like, wait a second, this isn't for me. This isn't what I want. And communication is so important at all levels, including that. That's the hardest part. Those conversations are the hardest ones to have, but they're the most important, because that's how relationships go sour, in my mind, over 20 years, where at year 6, one person realized that this isn't what they want anymore. And then they didn't say anything for 14 years and they just kept on going and it went to shit. You know what I mean? Like that's where my relationship would have gone if I hadn't said anything, if we had never communicated with all of this kind of stuff. I empathize so much with men though, who are in my position where maybe like it is a thing, especially now that I'm getting into in the gay community more. It's a thing. There's a lot more men out there than you might think who were gay and they married a woman and then they realize that they're gay and they separate at some point. Like it's certainly a thing, you know? So, but again, and I know I'm a unique situation, but the principles that I'm trying to talk about here are self-awareness and communication, because you have to have that level of self-awareness with yourself about what you actually want. Then you have to be able to communicate that with your partner for better or for worse. And the for worse part is the part that is hard. You know, it's very difficult to say, hey, there's a problem here with X, Y, and Z, up to the point where you might say, hey, there's a problem up to the point where I might have to end the relationship if this doesn't change or if that doesn't change. And oftentimes it will change, especially if they're committed to you. If they're on the same page, then they will evolve with you. But especially for people like me who got married when they're really young, you have to understand that, especially if you get married in your early 20s, you don't know yourself yet. You are going to evolve. You are going to change. You're probably going to change careers. You might decide, oh, I thought that I wanted to have kids, but now I don't. Or the opposite. Maybe you told them, hey, I don't want kids now. But then when you're 30, you're like, wow, I really do. You haven't had that conversation yet. Like these are all things you have to go into these relationships with the understanding that you are going to change. You're going to evolve. And if it evolves out of the relationship, like mine did, for instance, you have to communicate that if you want it to go well, if you want to remain friends afterwards, if you want to be friendly at all, if you want it to go well, you know, all these sorts of things. That's how communication is really the key. And Tim Ferriss, who's someone that's influenced me a lot, Tim Ferriss says that your happiness in life is correlated with the amount of uncomfortable conversations you're willing to have. And I've found that to be 110% true.
That's definitely a true statement.
For sure.
I love your generation, Paul. It was very different. It was very different for us because we didn't have access to the same kind of information that you have and that your generation does now. And so we had to wait until our mid to late 30s, sometimes into our 40s, until we until we experienced enough pain and heartache in our lives that we were forced to look at ourselves and we were forced to build this sense of self-awareness. But you guys have got access to so much more information than we ever had. And I love the fact that your generation, the generation, you know, X and Y, they really have a much higher sense of self-awareness. They know what they want and they're not afraid. You know, you're not afraid to go out there and have the difficult discussions because you've got this sense about yourself that is not necessarily selfish or self-serving, but it is at a high level very authentic. And you will have the conversations that you know you need to have. Whereas us guys, we were the sort of guys, a lot of us sort of guys that just shut up and did what we were supposed to do, how we were supposed to do it, because there were kids, because there were expectations, because whatever the reason, whatever story we told ourselves. But you guys just don't take that shit, so I love it.
I'm not sure whether I can concur to that, Michael, because I'm running an online survey where people can evaluate the status of their relationship. And first of all, more women fill this in than men. And after there are 25 questions which are scaled or which are scored, and then I leave room for open remarks. And when I read the remarks from these women, I read heartbreaking stories of men who are closing up, not opening, not talking, and just leaving all the, what they say, hard work to the women. So I think even in the young generation, men tend to say, do we have a problem? So is it already broken? So they, as you said earlier, they don't move until something really is hitting the fan.
Well, as you said, with people filling out the questionnaire, it's more women than men. Yep. And also the men are shutting down. So this is obviously a real problem that we have. And for the women to then go, okay, well, I'm trying to do everything. It's like trying to bail out a river while you're in the wet season.
Yep.
You're never going to get there. So both parties need to be part of it. So what sort of things can we advise men? Because I know that, we're always being told, you don't cry, you keep your feelings to yourself and everything else. You've got a job, you're supposed to be there, you're supposed to be the provider and everything else. And so men would then shut down because of that. So we're trying to change the way that we actually function from the way as young children, especially in my generation, how we were taught growing up as boys, what was expected of us when we were men. And so how do you get those men to start to open up? How do you get them to come forward and actually fill out questionnaires or just actually put their hand up and say, hey, I could do with some help here?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you go about that? What would you advise people, especially of my era? Because I'm older than all of you. And this is where you're getting a lot of men of my age. They've got their kids are well and truly grown up. They've got the grandkids around, everything else now, and they're looking at their partner and going, we've been together 25, 30 years, etc. And the divorce rate in that category is fairly high. So
again, I think men should step up and maybe ask this uncomfortable question, honey, how happy are you in our relationship right now? And maybe even say, I'm a numbers person, so maybe even say on a scale from 1 to 10, how happy are you? And if it's a 7, ask, so why? So what can we do to make it a 9 or a 10? And not automatically go into solution mode as we men often do, but at least acknowledge there might be a challenge. And that would be a starting point. At the moment, it's like we said earlier, we put our heads down and live on and live on and live on.
Yeah. Well, I've always been fearful of having asked any of my ex-partners and that, well, how's the relationship going? So I'm probably worried about what the answer was going to be. And I live in denial.
That's exactly the point. Why are you worried? You should know that she's happy. Or you should know why she's not happy.
So for the men out there who have got that feeling, how do we actually get them to take that first step? Probably be a way of bringing them out. Especially, I'd love to hear from Paul on that one as well. Being a younger fella, what advice would you have for older guys, knowing that what you know, with the broader knowledge that you have at your age than what we had at our age, at the same age?
I'd say, first of all, to what you said, it's a question of how we even define knowledge, because obviously I could have more factual knowledge just because I've been addicted to the internet longer, but you obviously have more perspective, more experience, things of that nature. So I would like to just raise that, obviously. So I speak from the place of maybe knowing a lot of, I don't know, items in books, but obviously just I haven't been in a 25-year relationship. because I'm 27, you know. Relationship would have had to start pretty young. But to answer your question, I think that it's important for the older generation to understand that they were screwed over by education systems, and we still to this day are screwed over by the education system, but my generation is a lot more aware of that. And I just feel that the older generations aren't aware that they got the short end of the stick by a long degree when it comes to teaching people about this sort of stuff. And that, in other words, what I'm saying is you have to go into it with that humility and open-mindedness of saying, wait a second, there's a lot that maybe I just don't know, despite the fact that I have a great deal of perspective and experience, but maybe not knowledge, honestly. At the end of the day, I just maybe don't know a lot of things out there. I might, again, have a lot of perspective and a lot of experience, but that doesn't mean that I know everything, if that makes sense.
Well, that's exactly right. But what I was looking for there was the different perspective, because I've always been a student of life, and my teachers have been from the very elderly to the very young. Everybody's my teacher. And if I can look at somebody, look through their eyes, I can see things differently. And that again caused me to think in a slightly different way to what I was before. And that's how I get my aha moments. I go, aha, that's another way of doing things.
For sure.
So I'm always interested in that side of it, because I'd like the younger people as well to start thinking about where they are in their relationship. So to hear you speak about it is really important to them. And
yeah,
then,
for sure.
You know, the connection and with listening to Michael and Jurgen asking you questions and everything else, it's all about working together, regardless of the ages and everything else. So we support each other. So
for
being
sure.
able to take that step.
Yeah, I'm totally with you.
Michael.
I think Paul made a really good point about perspective. And when the question is asked about what do men do when they're in a situation where they're unhappy or they know something's wrong. So here's the thing about men, and I've worked with men for nearly 15 years now. And the thing about men is that most men attach or define themselves by the success or the quality of their relationship. Okay? And so asking a man to step up in that regard and to ask their partner, where would you rate our relationship? Most men are not going to do that because they're absolutely just terrified of what the answer may be. They might know that their partner will say to them, well, if in all honesty, I'm really probably a 3 or a 4. And this is the reason why. Sex isn't good. You don't spend enough time with me. You're always working. And they'll have a laundry list because women, with all respect to women, what women do is women are very patient. They will give us time. They'll give us rope. They'll give us chances. They will be very, very patient and compassionate, but they get to a point just like we do. And so as men, we are very afraid of asking questions like that because we actually don't want the answer. We're more comfortable with what's familiar, and what's familiar is the routine that we've built up and that with our wife or our partner over however many years that is. So instead of maybe addressing it with your partner initially, my advice to a man would be, if you feel like something's not right, it probably isn't. In that regard, then perhaps you need to take responsibility to perhaps not step up, but step out, not out of the relationship, but out of your comfort zone without there being consequences, or you feel like there are possibly consequences or repercussions to that, and get some help for yourself as opposed to the relationship. Because as you grow as a person and as you become more self-aware and as you start to take more responsibility for who you are and how you're showing up as a person, then as a natural consequence of that, you will contribute and show up in your relationship at a higher level. And then over time, that 3 or 4 with your wife will turn into a 6 or 7 or maybe even 8. And then when you become more confident and empowered within yourself, then you'll be in a much better place to ask that question.
Because when you ask the question, then you're actually going to be asking about the improvement, not so much where you are, but that's what I was before, this is what I've been doing over this period of time, this is who I am now. Tell me about that improvement. Have I improved in the relationship? So if you're asking about an improvement, we're fine. But we're asking where we actually are in the relationship, there's our identity. It can go right out the window straight away.
And then we lose any and all perspective on how to repair and or fix the problem. Then we just go into, I'm obviously a failure as a man. I'm obviously a failure as a husband. Maybe my wife's looking elsewhere. I just won't. And then we'll retract and withdraw even more. So it's so important. It is so important that if you feel the need to ask that question in the first place from a place of fear, things aren't, then you already know things aren't that good, and you already know there's something to be worked on. So go off and work on it. Your wife or your partner will see gradual improvements anyway, and then they'll start responding to you at a higher level, and their level of relationship satisfaction will go up as a result of all of that. So it's all about working on ourselves and building a higher level of self-awareness. It's never about the relationship. So it's easy for call myself a relationship coach, but what I really am is just a coach and a mentor for people, individuals, and those individuals just happen to be in relationships that are not working as a result of the fact that they're not self-aware. They lack self-awareness, and that's all it is. Once you build that, the relationship flourishes.
And that's what I love about all the conversations I've been having on the campfire. It's all been about, in everything we need to work better in, it always comes back to self first. It's stepping out, work on yourself. That way you can do it. You can go and talk to somebody. There's no pressure on, there's no limelight on you. There's nothing there to fear. And you can then look at that and go, rightio, I'm not coming here to find out where I am. I'm coming here to find out where I can improve too.
Exactly.
And so you know that starting point, focus on the where you can be. And while you're then practicing that within the relationship, your partner is going to respond, because as soon as you change anything in any situation, you always change the outcome. And so you're going to change the response, and then you can monitor the response you're getting from your partner as well.
Exactly.
And you know whether you go, oh, I'm getting a little bit more attention, I'm getting more smiles, I'm getting a little bit more civility, or whatever it might be. And you go, great, something here is actually working. So now you're actually producing something, and men like to produce. We like to create. So you can look at this as being a creation then, and it takes the focus outside of you and your fears about what you think of yourself in that process. So I love that idea, and then being able to step up. And I'd love to see men doing that, so that, you know, when Jurgen, you're running questionnaires and everything else, I'd love to hear you come back and go, hey, I'm getting as many men as I'm getting women filling these questionnaires out. Because
I'd love that too.
Fear.
Would be great. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because that'll show that, you know, men have got over the fear that they've had, and we're starting to step into our own power. Because I think most of us, well, I know I did through my relationship, I wasn't in my power. I was when I felt like I thought I was when we went into the relationship, but because of the disconnects and everything else, my whole identity was based on the relationship I had. So as it dropped, our relationship with myself dropped as well. So how in the world could I then come back and improve the relationship without, as you said, all you guys stepping out and working on yourself first of all? And that's why I love it, you know, between the three of you. That seems to have been the common thread through the whole discussion, is understand yourself first fully, work on that, and then you know, come back to your partner. So it's not leading the relationship, it's stepping out of the crap that you've got going on in your head, work on that, and be present in the relationship again.
And how wonderful and empowering would it feel if your wife and or partner fell in love with you again after 10, 15, 20, 25 years, because you've stepped up and you've become a better person yourself, then your partner falls in love with you all over again. And the honeymoon period can start again for the second time 25 years later.
And that's exactly right, because if you're just going out and finding a new partner, really it's just a conquest. But it's not going to be a reflection of how you are as a powerful human being, as a man. So you need to be able to, you know, that relationship, that feeling of that love rekindling and everything else, I think it's got to be even more powerful than the first relation, you know, first feelings you had in that relationship when you first started.
It certainly would be, because it's much deeper.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from any men out there who have actually worked through that and have got those results. I'd love to hear your feedback on the comments, so that other men listening to this as well can then get, okay, it's not just the coaches talking, but it's people who have actually experienced it themselves. But from why you were talking, Michael, I believe that that's what you've actually done for yourself.
I have definitely. I've as I said, I had a 12-year marriage, and then I had a couple of relationships after that, and now I'm married, and we have created for us what is the perfect relationship for us. And you don't get to do that, or you don't get to a point of being able to do that until you go through a process of self-discovery. Yeah. And that process is ongoing. Like, it actually never ends, and I'm still going through it, and so is my wife. And it's just about leveling up all the time. It's about leveling up, and it's about becoming better. Just about becoming better and more self-aware all the time. Showing up, contributing, just being the best you can be in every moment.
And that you're always moving forward and creating. And as I said, that's what men love to create. Look at our workshops and things. We're always fiddling around in those and building things. So to do something that's really important, that you really get emotionally connected to, relationships are something that we really should apply ourselves to instead of just walking away from them.
Yep, absolutely.
That's been really brilliant, gentlemen. Thank you very much for, well, here in Australia, giving up your Sunday to come on Monday, you go holiday, actually. And in America, they're with Paul with giving up your Sunday afternoon as well. So I really appreciate your time today.
Oh, no, nothing to give up. This is what I love to do.
Excellent. That's what I feel all of us love to do. We like to be able to help people. So for all the people who have come here today, I hope you've enjoyed what you've heard. Get in touch with these men and have a chat with them. As I said at the end of all of these sessions, there's always their individual discussions I've had with them around the campfire. Go back to that announcement, my big thanks, it's sitting on the site. Have a look at what they've said in there as well. And if you feel a connection with the men and you'd like to find out more, get in touch with Michael, with Jurgen, with Paul, and discuss things a little bit deeper. But thank you for everybody who's been listening today, and a very huge thank you to you three gentlemen for joining me today on the panel.
No worries.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.
Anyway, bye-bye for everybody, and we'll see you on the next panel discussion.